two. It was an exciting day one activities, and my colleague Andrew will be doing an encapsulation of what we covered yesterday. I want to welcome you to today's session, and I'll have a bit of a presentation of really what went on yesterday, majorly on the media and how that went, and make a few announcements thereafter. So we had top two tweets, as you can see over there. Our lovely girl and Dr. Mukisa Kitui, who someone said is dropping knowledge faster than the speed of tweets. I thought that was really true. I was trying to keep up to the knowledge that he was trying to drop. Then the top two tweeters was that gentleman by the name, I don't know whether that is pastor, but it should be G. Benro. Is he in the room? Could we see this gentleman if he's in the room? Okay, could be tweeting from London for all we know. Then we have Kwame Hayabunu. That's a serious name. Do we have Kwame here with 53 tweets? All right, okay. Always remember to use that hashtag ICT4D 2016 as you tweet, so that we can all gather our tweets together. We reminded you yesterday about session evaluations. That didn't go very well yesterday, and we know that people are just trying to catch up with everything that was going on yesterday. We want to remind you to please evaluate your sessions. So what you need to do is go to that page, get to the session you're attending, and click. When you click, you'll get another window that tells you to basically do a session evaluation. When you click the session evaluation, you'll be able to find the page. So now you can rate that either with, if you want to give it a 1 star or 2 stars, and you have a space there to give some comments. And you click submit, and that will be complete, all right? Remember that we have hotel Wi-Fi, which is the SPH. It has no password, and we have the ICT4D guest. The password, as we mentioned yesterday, is 2016 guest. All right. I also want to remind everyone to continue to be good care of their property. I think yesterday we had some people leave their laptops at the registration desk overnight, and that had to be collected. I think that's I wouldn't want to comment about that. But please make sure if you want to leave your laptop or any of your properties or iPads, take them to the reception and register them there. Please do not leave them hanging. All right. And so then I would want to invite my colleague, Andrew, to give basically an encapsulation of what we covered yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Good morning. I hope yesterday was as stimulating for you as it was for me. I thought we had a very unusual group of speakers, and certainly senior people. I thought it would be important this morning to give a quick encapsulation. Bill and I talked about this, the basic themes that came out of those three speakers that might be valuable to keep in mind, and then transition to today with our first speaker, Darrell Owen. Secretary General Kitui had really framed his thinking now that we have the SDGs, the 2030 Development Agenda, and all the associated activities that will drive that agenda. He spoke of bureaucratic challenges and opportunities, and the power of e-commerce, which is, of course, where he really shows his expertise. The exponential growth of the knowledge society. And in the challenges, he pointed out that industry and stakeholders like you are moving faster than regulators and bureaucracies, because this is such a revolutionary digital expansion, exponentially, as he said. And he impelled us all to speak to the fourth industrial revolution and its challenges and its opportunities for labor, for professional fields, and yet for empowering people in the next generation of e-commerce and manufacturing. Minister Mishuru, the Kenyan minister, really set out 2 points that I thought were worthy of repeating. And that would be, first, this digital revolution is in itself a grand challenge because there are disparities that it's creating. He said, I thought very tellingly, that equal access is a constitutional right in Kenya. And it really speaks to the imperative that all people should be involved in the knowledge society. And he articulated some specifics about the national plan in Kenya for connecting particularly rural society. He emphasized the importance of public-private partnerships, and I thought this following phrase was particularly nice: a smart pad is an investment in the future. And then finally, Mr. Wanandaya of the organization One, co-founded by Bono, I think he pointed that out, said he has a movement that now is 7 million people strong from Los Angeles to Lagos, and that their principal focus is taking action to end extreme poverty and prevent disease, especially in Africa. And finally, I thought it was vital, and we should remember it throughout this conference, the role of metrics, the difficulty of statistical measurement, and the challenge of finding adequate metrics to demonstrate progress in the Sustainable Development Goals. 17 goals, 169 targets. And with that, the notion that transparency is very important and holding authorities accountable for their activities. As we transition today, I think those themes carry forward, but if there is one theme that might characterize today's presentations in the plenary, it would be the term connectivity. And there is an abundance of information speaking to that term, but what does it really mean when you unpack it? And who is really not connected, and how do we go about connecting them? And one thing as an aside, just before we introduce Darrell Owen, there is a book just released 2 weeks ago by a global strategist, and some of you may know him or be familiar with him. His name is Parag Khanna, K-H-A-N-N-A. The book is called Connectography, Connectivity Combined with Geography. And it's a clever hybrid, mapping the future of global civilization. What he is saying is megatrends that we're all experiencing in the world today: urbanization, the expansion of global supply chains, special economic zones, characterize the world of today and will increasingly characterize the world of the future, not borders between nations. And the book is elegant because it has an abundance of interesting new maps that he has created to demonstrate how the infrastructure of the urban and built environments of our societies, of civilization, really characterize today and the future, connectography. He points out the massive investments that are underway and will continue in infrastructure, all types of infrastructure, urban, electricity, water, waste management treatment, certainly cellular systems, large internet-based infrastructure, telecom towers. These investments, and many studies are there looking at this with strategic foresight in mind and good corporate planning. $3 trillion a year of annual investment in infrastructure in the world today. And by comparison, he says $1.75 trillion a year investment in military. And that difference is significant, but the gap between the two is increasing rapidly, with infrastructure outlays projected to rise to $9 trillion by the year 2030. So he says, he argues in the book, the global revolution of connectivity is well advanced. And this infrastructure, by mileage, kilometers, and so forth, pales in comparison to the actual kilometers of international borders. Just as one small one, railroads, of course, highways, pipelines, 750,000 kilometers of undersea internet cables, and you've probably all seen those amazing maps that connect key population and economic centers. And by contrast, we have 250,000 kilometers of international borders. So it's a subtle thing. By some estimates, and I quote him, mankind will build more infrastructure in the next 40 years alone than it has in the last 4,000 years. The infrastructure puzzle, as he calls it, thus gives us a way of a lattice of infrastructure circuitry. And more, the world is starting to look a lot like the internet. So in this inexorable march to globalization, connectivity, not geography and national boundaries, constitute our destiny and the evolution of civilization. And thus his turn of phrase in the title, connectography, which is a clever use. I love geography. I'm a wannabe geologist, geographer, and by and large, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I think don't lose position. Darrell Owen has been engaged in digital development in the international development arena for over 25 years, designing, managing, and implementing ICT projects in Eastern Europe, Africa, and Asian countries through public and private partnerships with governments and businesses. With a master's degree in telecommunications, his particular focus has been expanding internet connectivity for rural communities through the application and deployment of new and emerging technologies. He began his career at the Bonneville Power Association in the US Pacific Northwest, where he managed the emergence of personal computers, local and wide area networks, and client-server applications. He joined the United States Agency for International Development in the early 1990s to help accelerate digital development programs in the agency portfolios. Before his retirement from the US government in 1999, Mr. Owen was instrumental in advancing digital development and connectivity programs under the auspices of the USAID. He's a recognized strategic planner and expert in ICT legal and regulatory policy development, design and implementation of national broadband plans, and disbursement of universal service funds. He represented USAID on US delegations to the United Nations Commission on Science and Technology for Development, mentioned by Secretary General Katuy yesterday, and played a seminal role in advancing best practices for digital development in the Commission's activities. For over 15 years, Mr. Owen has been consulting for a number of companies directly to USAID and, most recently, NetHope. Let's welcome Darrell Owen, who will speak to the theme, Getting the Basics Right, the Digital Divide, and its impact on achieving the SDGs.
I feel a little bit like a town crier. Every time I have an opportunity, I want to ring the bell for the development community that before we start talking too much about ICT4D, we got to get the communications piece in play. Otherwise, you have a lot of pockets, little small, unsustainable pockets of automation. When you go to the internet, you go to the cloud, you can get massive scale in very, very short periods of time and with great economics. I think most of us that were engaged, at least in the peripheral of setting the SDGs as they were developed, was a little bit concerned that there wasn't much focus on ICT within the development goals, sustainable development goals. What's wrong with people? But anyway, this is where it's at. It's in Target 9C. And I want to make two distinctions, and it'll carry through in my presentation. One, significantly increase access to ICT as a major theme, but then we drop down to the focus of my presentation, and that is primarily, and strive to provide universal affordable access to the internet in the least developed countries by 2020. This winds up being the theme, and we'll see here very quickly, if I can get Siri off of my computer here. If we take one quick look at the data coming out of the International Telecommunications Union, you can see in about 2 seconds why LDCs are separated out. Okay. The lower line is the least developed countries. There's 48 of these countries. And what you can see is that over the 15 years of the Millennium Development Goals, those countries have continued to get further and further and further behind than everybody else. And even ITU's projections for the next 5 years plus show that that's going to continue. So even though this has been a discussion for 10, 15 years, we're not making any headway on that group right there. Now, if you think, where does most of the development dollars go, and where are the people that are impoverished, living in extreme poverty, where would one guess they might be located? You know, it's in the least developed countries, almost by definition. So when we talk about leveraging ICTs for international development, we're still missing. We've got this incredible digital challenge that we have yet to step up to. And that's basically the theme of today. This is what it looks like on the left in the orange. This is what it looks like geography in regions, and on the right in income levels, okay? It's appropriate that we're doing this in Africa because, as you can see here, Africa is struggling compared to other continents and other regions. And you can see the actual numbers of the least developed. Now this here is individuals using the internet. Now, I do want to make a comment that when it comes to voice communications, mobile specifically, the picture looks a lot different. And I give a lot of credit to governments that have opened up their markets, MNOs that have gone in and made investments. In these same rural areas where you have very little internet, you're probably talking 65 to 85% coverage or adoption of mobile technology. The problem is you don't have any bandwidth behind it. Very thin routes in the middle mile and the distribution. A lot of this explosion was done during the 2G, 2.5G time frame of the mobile technology, and it just doesn't have the bandwidth. So this winds up being the biggest challenge. Now, the exciting thing, to me, one of the most exciting things that there's going, is that in the last 6 months, as actually slightly before the Sustainable Development Goals got put into play, and afterwards, there has been global focus on connectivity that I haven't seen in something like the 25 years that I've been involved with this. We did work, when I first joined AID, some of you here may remember the Leland initiative that brought internet into 20 African countries the very first time. Now, that was a big deal. Later on, when I left AID, I was involved in the Last Mile initiative, in which we focused on the last mile, the rural areas. And then about 6, 7 years ago, I was asked to come back into AID and consult with them to develop what was called the Global Broadband and Innovations. And there were certainly other activities going on in parallel, but not a lot. Let me go through read a couple statements that have been all within the last 6 or 7 months that indicate there is an incredible convergence globally that has never happened before in terms of connectivity. It's very exciting. It's something for all of us to think about. How do we leverage this? The Addis Ababa Agenda, July 2015. There's a STI and capacity building that states, quote, "We will promote the development and the use of ICT infrastructure, as well as capacity building, particularly in the least developed countries, least connected countries, small island developing states, including rapid, universal, affordable access to the internet." Major statement coming out of that. The ITU just recently come up with a Connect 2020 program, and it has 4 general areas: growth, inclusion, innovation, sustainability. If you look at the inclusion, it states, quote, bridge the digital divide and provide broadband for all. And it has a target of 1.5 billion by 2020. If we go to the Economic Forum, World Economic Forum, WEF, they have a future of the internet. They too go forward with some focus on around $1 billion to $1.5 billion. The Global Connect Initiative, the US State Department pulled together, is in the process of pulling together a collaboration of a whole World Bank and so on and so forth, a number of people, organizations. They have a roadmap for connecting another 1.5 billion, 1.5 billion people. Governments and multilateral development banks should continue to build technical expertise on digital connectivity, and all stakeholders should share best practices, and it goes on from there. The ITU Broadband Commission, it was called Broadband Commission for Digital Development, but with the Sustainable Development Goals, it's Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development. So they've reoriented themselves slightly, renamed themselves to focus on attention. Here's a couple quotes that are within the last few months. They had an event in January in Davos, and they came out of there with this statement. As leaders of government, industry, development, and investment organizations from around the world, we believe that global internet connectivity, specifically global broadband connectivity, is a significant enabler to achieve sustainable development for all. And I'll go back to Irina Bokova, who sits on that panel, who about 3 years ago had a wonderful statement: the digital divide continues to be the development divide. And just here in April, coming out of a commission meeting in Dubai, she states, today the technology revolution must become a development revolution. The world is going through a staggering confluence of emerging technology breakthroughs that can open vast new horizons for growth and development. So we have across the planet, in a number of different high-level forums, major commitments to the next 1.5 billion, that type of thing, okay? Now, how do you get past from talk to actual on-the-ground implementation is certainly an issue. The other thing that's encouraging is the private sector engagement in this space. I remember about 10 years ago, I was doing a Universal Service Fund project in Vietnam. And concurrent with that, as part of the project design, we did some WiMAX at that time, a current technology that was just emerging, 2 deployments, one in a city and one in a very rural area. And I remember sitting down with one of the vice presidents of Intel, and I asked him a very simple question. Intel makes chips. Why do you care about broadband? And he laughed at me. I thought, well, okay. And then he explained it. He said, it's very simple, Darrell. We make chips, you're right. Those chips are bought by people that make computers. Those computers get sold into the marketplace. If the internet isn't there, those computers don't get sold. And if those computers don't get sold and built, we don't sell any chips. And they invested literally millions of dollars in the advancement of that WiMAX technology. You can look at this list and a bigger list than this and come to the exact same conclusion, not just of people making chips, okay, but Google providing an online cloud services, Microsoft. Just last week, I came in late Saturday, I went up Sunday to Nanyuki, and we had been involved through USAID in a project called Mwingu. It was a TV white space type of thing. And if you go up there, you can see this phenomenal build out of a wireless network. And as soon as that thing is turned on, cloud services are available to everybody on that network. Okay, they don't have to invent something, you don't have to build something, you've got to basically plug into it. Their business model, those that happened to hear Microsoft presentation, Frank McCosker yesterday, Microsoft's business strategy is cloud services. If they do not continue to add people to the internet and access their cloud services, Microsoft doesn't grow. You can say the same for Facebook, you can say the same for Google, and a whole bunch of others. Now the key is, where are they going to do it? And yes, they're going to misstep once in a while. I think most of us in this room would say Facebook may have done that once or twice. Okay, but we all have, so let's not be too critical about it. But the point is, they are making significant investments, whether it is drones, high-altitude balloons, micro-satellite networks. They're all making investments, not because they want to be in the communication business. Their business model is in the cloud. So for us, ICT for development folk, we need to figure out how to leverage that. Public-private partnerships. How do we take advantage, maximum advantage? This is how I would sort out, going back to the same graph that I showed earlier. The significantly increased access to ICT. By and large, the multilaterals, the internationals, and the corporations that are engaged in this space are going to be on that top side. Okay, they're going to be in the developed and the developing economies. There isn't much of a market down in the least developed countries. This is where we're going to, I love the word in the target, provide. There's a lot of striving required if we're going to figure out how to solve this problem. Okay, this is not, it's not business as usual. You can look, in fact, at ITU's own projections on the top two charts there. And what it'll show you, I joke around with some of my friends, nobody has to wake up in the morning and we're going to get another billion to $1.5 billion on the internet in the next 5 years. The market forces are already in place to do that in markets where it's big enough. It's the bottom one that they aren't. The default in the least developed countries, if we don't do something, we could be having this exact same presentation 15 plus years from now after the SDGs have been replaced by something else. That's what's at stake here. Okay. What is it that we can do? And by the way, I don't think anybody has the full answer. And there is no answer in singular. It's a number of events. Let's drill down just to give you an idea of what this looks like. There are 48 least developed countries in the world today that have a total of about 900 million people. Okay, and if you look at that, that's about 12% of the world's population. 72% on average of those populations live in extreme poverty. 70% say. 70% live in rural settings. And of course, only 10% have internet access. This isn't what you would call a great market for people to go out and say, hey, let's go capture some of that market. These are people that are living on $1.70, $1.25 a day, okay? How much of that will they buy? One thing I'll mention, there's a couple projects we've been linked with a little bit. One was up here, Mawingu, why I went and saw it. Another one is Air Jaldi in India, which is another great one. What they're finding, if they can get the price point down to about $3 a month, $3 to $4 a month, people will sign up in sufficient quantities to make it pay for itself and actually make a profit. There is a market out there that is just simply not being reached at this stage. Since we're in Africa, here's what the least developed countries in Africa look like. There's 34 of them, total population 570 million. 51%, surprisingly, poverty levels in Africa, least developed countries, is actually not as great as it is in other parts of the world. Rural percentage is about the same. And the internet, but the internet is a little less. Okay, so this gives us a picture of the challenges that we are confronted with as the development community, where you want to deploy ICTs but you may not have the pipe in order to actually deliver it. This one needs some prioritization. I'll move now to, okay, that's fine, now what do we do about it? As Andrew indicated, I've been at this a few years. Over the course of that time, we keep developing different models, and this one pretty well has stuck here of late. The core focus, if you will, and I'll just walk through it real quick. The core focus is sustainable business models for delivering affordable internet services, both the access as well as the services on it, to rural populations. That's really the challenge that we're after. And the four circles, the four slices around that, facilitating legal, regular environment. If you have a market in any country, all you got to do, the government primarily, is get out of the way and let the private sector do it. But where you don't have a market, you got to go the extra mile or two or three. It may be frequency management, it may be universal service funds, a better broadband plan, things of this sort. But you got to facilitate it. Off-grid clean energy. We're way past the grid on these, so your cost, your capital cost not only has to be low, but you have to have put in clean energy, ideal. One of the aid investments in Mwingu, in fact, was actually in the clean energy part, that aid invested from a clean energy perspective into solar panels to power the vast majority of that entire network. Okay. Low cost, TV white space, again, Frank McCoster talked about that yesterday in his breakout session. Locally relevant socioeconomic impacting content. This is where we come into play. Okay, it's not just about connectivity. This is going to sound a little raw and crude, but everywhere you go, there's some discussion about what are kids looking at when they get into the internet access in rural. Okay, and it's pornography. Okay. That's locally relevant content if you happen to be a teenager, let's face it. Okay, so why don't we put something else on there that has some value, that can turn them into better citizens, better educated, help the farmers, and so on and so forth. All kids are doing is going after something relevant. Okay, so let's quit criticizing what that is and put focus on what should we be doing to add value to draw people into it. And finally, the local adoption. And here you have gender issues, okay, which is probably a whole conference in itself in a lot of cultures. You have access. Not everybody can have, even Frank was talking about $130, $140 phone in a pocket. People can't even afford that if you're making $2 a day. Okay, so you got to have some sort of a community access. You got to have language literacies, which when you get out into rural areas is a real issue. Digital literacy. So it takes a real ecosystem. And I put this forward because later this morning into the early afternoon, I'm going to host 3 consecutive discussion groups, and we'll work into more depth on this, but primarily in a discussion fashion. Let's pull some stuff out. I can tell you, I don't have all the answers. I don't know anybody that does, but I think collectively, we've got examples here and there, India, here in Kenya. There's other countries that have succeeded. What is the magic? What are the variations that we can be looking for? How can we codify that and make that available to the development communities and the governments? This is just looking at some of the challenges. Like I mentioned, the dispersed rural population, low income, and the list just goes on. Those are some of the big challenges. And the needed disruptions, national broadband plans, functioning universal service fund, shared infrastructure, and the list goes on. New business models. You know, I suspect there's very few people in this room that understand that when the phone came into being, in almost every country, the government took over and owned and operated the telephone system. In the United States, there was a monopoly, all right, but it was a privately owned monopoly of Bell. It wasn't given a monopoly other than they had the patent on the phone for less than 20 years. When that patent came off, Over the next 30 years, something like 6,000 independent telcos were developed in the United States. And there was a period of time in which the teledensity in rural Iowa of independence was greater than what Bell had in Manhattan. That shows you getting the power out, getting the government out of the way, and letting local entrepreneurs have at it. Now, I'm not suggesting that we repeat that, but there may be other business models. Maybe it's a franchise model. Maybe it's where a carrier goes into franchising. ISPs kind of have an independent carrier quality to them. These are the types of things we just need to be exploring. And I'll end up with one more here. And at a macro level, some things we ought to be thinking about. A national priority on expanding internet. It needs to be owned by the country, not by outsider. It's exciting to see Google involved in Facebook and World Economic Forum and ITU. That's very, very exciting. But if it isn't owned locally, it's probably not going anywhere. Translate these global aspirations and advocacy into local action. We need a plan of national broadband plans. There's other ways to do that, ICT strategies and things of that sort. We need a cohesive approach, ecosystem. It's not a single, I wish there was a single bullet that you could shoot and solve everything. It's just not gonna happen. It's a whole litany of things. National plans, commitment, act, and monitor. It's not a piece of paper. I give a lot of credit to the International Telecommunications Union for focusing on national plans. But the reality is, if you pick them up and look at them, there's very few of them that are active documents that are being managed, that are being updated, that has public and private sector buy-in and actionable types of things. This is what's needed here. Public-private collaboration, innovative disruption. If there were a phrase I would like to get across here, what we need in the least developed countries is innovative disruption. Innovative disruption. More of the same will get us more of the same. Shock, shock, I know. We need to change things in a significant way. And it's connectivity and energy and content and adoption. And with that, I'll bring it to a close, and hopefully some of you can join us in these 3 sessions that we're doing this morning and this evening and start drilling down a little bit deeper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darrell, for those great insights and statistics on digital divide and its impact on the SDGs, achieving our SDGs. I'll move forward and introduce a gentleman who will be talking to us about the national data revolution in Kenya. Philip Thigo is a Kenyan technology and governance practitioner, and he currently serves as a senior advisor on data and innovation at the Legislative and Intergovernmental Liaison Office at the Office of the Deputy President of Kenya. He co-founded the Infonet in Kenya, an innovation initiative that is aimed at building capabilities of governments, civil society, and citizens for better development outcomes. Mr. Thigo has previously held executive positions, most notably Infonet Africa Foundation, El Tala, based in Tunisia, working with organizations in Asia, Africa, Arab world, and Latin America. He is currently a communications consultant for the African Union Commission, Bureau of the Chairperson, and African Governance Architecture at the Department of Political Affairs. He was honored at the 50th anniversary of the Academy of Achieving United States of America as a delegate. Philip serves as a point of contact for open government partnership for Kenyan government and as an interim steering group member at the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, where he co-chairs the data roadmaps and ecosystems working groups. Help me welcome Mr. Philip Thigo.
Good morning. Habari zenu. Seriously, I won't talk if somebody doesn't talk to me back. Okay. Good morning. Habari zenu. Kenyans, if your friends do not know Kiswahili, there's a problem, right? Thank you very much. Of course, I'm not Zorava Singh. I'm stepping in for my colleague who just had a misfortune with his mother. But I want to thank CRS, I think, for affording the government of Kenya an opportunity to come and share with you a couple of what we are doing at the presidency. As you see, we had a slight malfunction, but I think I'll just try to wing it as we go forward. How many people knew about MDGs? What do they even mean? One goal. Somebody just shout one goal of the MDGs. You see, you knew MDGs, but not the goals, right? How many know about SDGs? 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 Don't be shy, just raise up your hand. So basically, I think there's a new, this clicker doesn't work. Okay, cool. Basically, I think for us at the office, this is really what we're looking at. The idea about SDGs is really about those 5 Ps, right? It's about people. At the end of the day, development must be people-centric. It's about the planet. It has to be done in a way that we leave the planet in a sustainable way for those who are coming after us. It has to be about, I think, prosperity, because prosperity is just not about a few individuals, but really has to be shared. It's about peace, because without peace, then we really have nothing. And then it's about partnerships, and this is really what I want to focus on today. MDGs really looked at partnerships at a very nuanced level, but I think SDGs are really looking at partnerships at a very real level. Clicker. So I think for me,
we are living in a worldwide... All around us, a deluge of data is telling us more about how we live, how we work, and what we're thinking. But the data revolution isn't reaching everyone. In some of the world's poorest countries, even basic data is missing. For example, in poor countries, more than 2 out of 3 births are never counted. Why does this matter? Without good data, governments can't plan where to build schools, provide doctors, and lay down roads. And citizens can't hold governments to account. That's why we need a data revolution for everyone. And now is the time. The world is setting out its development goals for 2030. There is an explosion of new technologies. There's an unprecedented demand for data. Innovations abound. There's never been a better time to ensure all countries can fight poverty by monitoring progress in education, environment, health, and gender equality. But how?
How many people have heard about the data revolution? For sustainable development? Not in business. Basically, then I think the idea of the data revolution was really about last year, 2015. And the idea was that the UN Secretary General really had put together a team that actually did a report on why a data revolution is important. And the game changer, I think, between SDGs and MDGs is really about data. And the idea about data is really everybody must be counted. And of course, all of you who know about SDGs, it's really about leaving no one behind. And the only way you'll know you've not left anybody behind if you count everybody. So basically, I think for us, we launched the national partnership. It's not resizing very well. We launched a national partnership on sustainable development goals last year, and this was done by His Excellency the Deputy President. The idea really is to do things a bit differently. Previously, you would have government working alone. You'd have civil society trying to do a lot of things that government cannot be able to do. You'd have private sector doing their CSR, and all of us claiming to work in the same space and for the same people. So the idea was really to see how we can harness this collective energy so that we can begin to focus and catalyze development progress. Yeah. Tried. Okay, I give up on the clicker. Just slide. It's not working. It's fine. You can kill the slides. I think so. Basically, I think for us, the idea then was to put together a creative ecosystem, and the ecosystem for us really was about that, right?
Taking advantage of the large volumes of data that exist.
The data revolution is designed to ensure the success of the Sustainable Development Goals so that they can be monitored and they can be achieved.
How can we as a country leverage on the opportunities presented by new technology to be able to accelerate the pace of our development and service delivery?
for decision making, for channel expansion, for resource allocation.
It is a constitutional right.
For transparency of governments and for accountability.
Our experience over the last few weeks of planning for the forum has seen players open up and even discuss issues that they had never been given a platform to discuss.
Everybody wants to understand how a data revolution can look like at national level and more so at subnational level. It is really important what Kenya is doing.
They are what we call supportive pillars. For instance, in Kenya, we are focusing on 4 key pillars. That's health, education, transport. Fourth one is agriculture, which is quite critical.
We've sort of come up with a multi-stakeholder approach anchored at the office of the Deputy President. But it's a collaboration between government, between private sector, that is, we have Kenya Association of Manufacturers, we have civil society.
The real value of this initiative is that it integrates private sector, government, civil society, NGOs, funders, and other types of development partners.
We're going to be living in an era of data revolution. We need what is called data literacy.
We nurture talent that can be used to work with data.
To ensure that both the legislations and the policy being drafted and being formulated by the government are open and accessible to the Kenyan citizens.
We are not going to stop the data revolution. So we better get on board, fully prepared, fully aware to make it work, but not only work for other people, but to work for those of us in our countries on this continent.
The development challenge is the challenge of now. And the now requires everybody to really come up to speed and use data for decision making, to be very efficient around it.
Korir Sing'oei, Head of Law and Policy at the Presidency, the data revolution is here.
So basically that's the snapshot of the entire ecosystem. And as you've seen, the idea really is to bring everybody on board. And because I think the President and the Deputy President are very clear that a development prerogative of Kenya is not a preserve of one particular institution, is not a preserve for one sector of the economy, it's actually a prerogative for everybody. And for us, really, Kenya has been leading in the SDGs. We know that our Ambassador Macharia was really the one leading in New York. But also, it also takes, I think, puts a lot of pressure on us. So that is simply not about adopting the goals, but also about, can you help me with the slide, please? It's not about only adopting the goals, but I think it's also about how we leverage on the opportunity that comes about that. I think our focus is really about creating vibrant data ecosystems. It's about creating data collaboratives. I know there's a lot of collaboratives in this room. It's about data principles, standards, and protocols. We know that there's a lot of people holding data, whether private or shared, but maybe a lot of them are not interoperable. It's about innovation and collaboration. How do you bring in the innovative community so that they actually can access data that is open and create tools, platforms, opportunities around it? We know we're in the era of open data, but in most cases, it really doesn't really translate into economic value to a lot of young people. So how are we able to create that deliberate infrastructure so that everybody, including innovators, are part of the development progress? It's about resource alignment, putting money everywhere without understanding where really the problem is. So how do you align everything so that we actually focus? And in 2030, as my previous speaker said, we don't enter into another, I don't know what they call it, right? I think we're running out of acronyms, right? MDGs, SDGs, I don't know what that would be. But the idea is not to have something else. And I think the last thing which really speaks to this room is really issues of specifications and architectures. What tools, platforms, capabilities are there that are in this room that we can be able to leverage collectively so that we translate actually in a way that we can be able to use data, not only for reporting. I know we do reports, but for decision making, so that the policymaker sitting somewhere can actually make decisions, but also the citizen looking at the policymaker can know how the policymaker really arrived at the decisions they're making. Next, whatever this is. Just go, it's really not working very well.
Because of its timeliness and ability to be used in multiple ways to make large proportions of low-income people visible, The potential for data-driven development is unprecedented. In fact, in my very honest opinion, any decision-making that is not based on accurate data is simply guesswork.
And is that a fact, right? So I think the idea for us, and right from the top in Kenya, we are really aware of the potential of what data can do. And that's why I think we have been very clear in terms of creating this ecosystem. So just to explain it a bit, we have civil society, private sector, government agencies, innovators, academia, in the space of a steering committee. Everybody sits in the steering committee in a very equal way. The idea is simply to see how we can leverage the collective power that is in Kenya so that we can begin to address SDGs. This comes from really a background that we took 4 years just to implement the first MDGs, 4 years. That means that was around 2004. By the midterm review, we really hadn't achieved much. We could count the number of goals that we'd achieved. This time, we want to do it a bit differently. We want to get off the block, immediately begin to see what nuances are there. Kenya is already working on an SDGs baseline so that we can see the unfinished business of MDGs and the new areas within which SDGs really have to be addressing. The other bit that we are critically looking at, of course, is the power of innovation. If for example, this is the home of M-Pesa, this is the home of Ushahid, is the home of Kibera, is the home of a lot of these nuances. And if you look at that slide, for me, really, it's what really is this revolution. This is simply a sample of what we are thinking in Kenya, that we are working together with Orange Telecom, is beyond simply using our surveys to understand where areas where there's no electricity. How do you use mobile data where people are calling more and where there's no electricity? So how do you measure that really to see which areas require electricity, for instance? So, and there are a lot of these applications that you see in terms of climate resilience. How are you able to use anonymized cell phone data so that you can be able to see where groupings of people are and where there's a lot of rain? And we did that in our lab at the office. And the idea then, you can be able to predict beyond your National Statistical Office of how really to apportion or strategically allocate resources and commodities. How we're able, for example, to understand school enrollment. How we're able actually to let the innovative community map, and so that you can tap in and pull that data to even tell you where the schools are. I know you've heard of Kibera, I'm mentioning it again. It was a place that was previously unmapped, but then how are you able to bring that data into decision-making and not necessarily a single project standalone? And I think for us, as we move forward, this will really be where Kenya will be going. At the global level, we have something called the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. We've come together, a couple of governments, the government of the United States. I know USAID is really a key player in this. The government of Colombia, government of Philippines, government of the UK, and government of Mexico. The idea of these 5 vanguard governments is actually to come up with what we call national data roadmaps. The idea of the roadmaps is really to create a roadmap of how we can harness innovation, technology, and data for sustainable development. The other idea really around this ecosystem is also to ensure that there's exchange across. We're calling it a government digital coalition for the first time, where we can have technical people within states actually engaging, but also civil society across the governments also engaging to see how, for example, citizens in Colombia or civil society in Colombia are holding government of Colombia to account. What really are the best practices that even civil society can learn in that sense? What can we learn, I think, as government entities in a way that Colombia is engaging with civil society? How are we able to use statistics in more creative ways that are not simply census that take really a long time to do that? How are you able to work with the National Bureau of Statistics or the National Statistical Offices in a way that creates opportunity to understand development? How do you work at sub-national level? It's good that we are here in Nairobi in Safari Park, but we know at the very margins, we really don't know what is happening, or they don't have opportunity to actually engage in these issues. But also, they really are not interested in SDGs, let's be honest. They're interested in opportunity. They're interested in access to services. They're interested in the basics. And so how do we ensure that we really do not leave anybody behind? And I think with that, I really just invite you, especially the countries that I've mentioned, US, Colombia, Philippines, UK, if you have people from these countries. I'll be very happy to share contacts from your respective governments in terms of the ecosystems that are emerging in those countries. There are a couple of projects that we're working on. We're working on what we call an SDGs toolkit. I know this is the innovations community. We will be very interested to understand what it is that you can put in this toolkit. The toolkit will be given to, again, the 5 countries and increasingly expanding. Tanzania just came in, Senegal, Sierra Leone just came in, Nigeria is coming in very soon. The idea is so that your work can actually begin to be part of the mainstream, so that nobody really is at peripheral. I know one campaign is here. One campaign. If one is here, one is part of the anchor partners in terms of civil society, so I encourage a lot of you to talk to one. We've been doing a lot of work, I think, with them at the global level, but also at the Pan-Africa level. And I think with that,